Okay, hello. I believe this is working. This is my first time videoing my desktop, so bear with me. We're going to try this, in which I'm going to talk through the questions with you for every chapter, but most importantly, what's important to take out of each chapter. If there's important quotes, important moments that you should know for an upcoming essay, that's more so what the focus of these videos will be. Okay, so this week you guys were reading chapter 17 to chapter 22. Chapter 17, not a whole lot of thematic significance, except that we do meet Bob Ewell. We did talk briefly about this before everything went crazy and you guys were still in class. So describing Bob Ewell's character, he's not a great guy. We know right away he's very uneducated. He's rude. He speaks very lowly about his daughter. Okay, he likens her to animals repeatedly. He doesn't even want to associate himself with her. So just all around, not a great guy. Okay, we don't like Bob Ewell. We're not supposed to like Bob Ewell. Truly, that is the significance for chapter 17. All right, we're introduced to the Ewells. We can move on. Chapter 18 is a little bit more interesting. We're introduced to Mayella Ewell, and she adds some pretty interesting dynamics into the case. One, because she's actually quite a sympathetic character, okay? Give me a second. So Lee's presentation of Mayella emphasizes her role as a victim. Scout goes so far as to say that she must be the loneliest person in the world. Okay, so briefly, we can kind of empathize with Mayella. She has a terrible life. She has a terrible father who we do learn later on is abusing her. They allude to the fact that he's abusing her sexually, but as well, he's for sure abusing her physically. She's taking care of the 8 to 9 children that are on the property. She's never gotten education. And also, the chapter gives us the indication that she tries to care a little bit about what she looks like. She does try to take care of herself. She has decent hygiene. So we do feel bad for her in the sense that she's trying to be a little bit different from her family, but at the same time, any sort of remorse, any sort of empathy that we might have towards Mayella is marred by her attempt to destroy Tom Robinson in order to cover her own shame. Okay, so our empathy can only extend so far in regards to this character. We can really have little sympathy for Mayella Ewell. Whatever her sufferings may be, she is inflicting cruelty onto others. Whatever she may have suffered, she is now inflicting that upon Tom Robinson. Okay. So we meet Mayella Ewell. She doesn't even know how to respond to Atticus being polite to her, so he calls her Miss Mayella Ewell, and she immediately accuses him of making fun of her. This kind of gives us the indication that she has never in her life been treated respectfully, because she doesn't even know what it looks like or sounds like. She's only ever been belittled and ridiculed, and so that's what she assumes Atticus is doing to her. In regards to Tom, so in chapters 18 to 19, we do get a revelation about Tom, and that is that he's been in a severe accident as a child, and so his entire left arm is crippled. So if you remember in chapter 17, Atticus made the point that Mayella's face was badly beaten on the right side of her body. Well, that would indicate then that she was beaten by someone who was left-handed. And then, of course, he made the point that Bob Ewell is, in fact, left-handed. He had him write his name in front of the entire jury, and he was left-handed. So then to point out that Tom doesn't even have a right hand that he can use, again, is just showing us more evidence that it was not Tom who beat Mayella, which then, of course, puts into question, was she even sexually abused in any way by Tom? Probably not. Okay, so that's our chapter 18. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to mention? Okay, chapter 19. Chapter 19, we get the cross-examination from Mr. Dace towards Tom, and it's extremely harsh, and it forces Dill into tears. So Dill is still a child, and he's responding to the wickedness that he's seeing with tears. So the adults in the room who are accustomed to this behavior, they think nothing of it. But by showing us how Dill responds in such a tangible, physiological way to this cruelty that's being shown to Tom, it's evoking, it's speaking to the humanity in the reader, okay? And as well, it's highlighting the fact that a lot of empathy is not being shown at all by the townspeople, okay? What's being done to Tom should cause everyone in the courtroom to feel extremely uncomfortable. Everyone should be responding similar to Dill, but he is the only one who's bored to tears. Okay. All right, chapters 20, 21, 22, we meet Mr. Dolphus Raymond, who's a new character. We had met him briefly, and he is the man who prefers to live with the colored community. He's married to a colored woman. He has, as the book calls it, half children, and he just, as he says, he prefers the company of Black people rather than white people. So the importance of Raymond's character lies in the nature of his preference for Blacks. So he never explains precisely why he prefers their company. He just does. Similarly, the white community never explains why it hates people of color. It just does. So the difference between these two ingrained attitudes, however, is that where the white community imposes its preferences unapologetically on the whole of Macomb, whereas Raymond, he acts on his preference solely because he wants to live that way, not because he wants to dictate how others should live. Okay, so Mr. Raymond is actually quite a sympathetic character. Let's see, what else? So in relation to these questions, what thematically related insights do Scout and Dill receive outside of the classroom? It's talking about what does Mr. Dolphus Raymond teach them. So let me change my color. Mr. Raymond helps them understand that people see what they want to see. So, is Mr. Raymond actually always drunk? Is he truly the town's drunk? No, he's not. He understands, though, that people will not understand his desire to live separate from the white community. So he gives them a reason to help them understand. He allows them to think that he's a drunk when he actually isn't. Okay? So Raymond understands the fact that people do not know how to react to new ways of being. They don't know how to accept a white man who wants to live in the Black community. So he gives them an out. He allows them to believe that he is a drunk, and this gives them a way to explain his behavior. So in this way, Mr. Raymond is actually sacrificing his whole reputation. He allows the town people to believe something about him that isn't true, just so that they can continue living their lives and he can live his life in peace. Whether or not that's a good way to go living is, you can make that decision for yourself. You can contrast Mr. Raymond with Atticus. So whereas Mr. Raymond it seems as though he believes the town is a little bit beyond hope. He doesn't even want to try to change their perspectives. Atticus, who's a little bit less embittered, seems to hold out hope for the town. Okay, so his closing arguments that we're going to talk about in a second, they're devoid of despair, but rather he speaks to the jury with confidence, urging them to find the dignity within themselves to make the right choice. So whereas Atticus believes that the town can change, he believes there's hope, he believes that every step forward is a step worth making, Mr. Raymond kind of takes the other way of thinking and just thinks to himself, you know what, I would rather just live in peace and let the town continue doing what they're doing. All right, this is also the chapter where Atticus delivers his famous speech, his famous closing remarks to the jury. And at the very end, he is condemning something. So let me open my book up. When he says, "But there is one way in this country in which all men are created equal. There is one human institution that makes a pauper the equal of a Rockefeller, the stupid man the equal of an Einstein, and the ignorant man the equal of any college president. That institution, gentlemen, is a court. It can be the Supreme Court of the United States, or the humblest J.P. court in the land, or this honorable court which you serve. Our courts have their faults, as does any human institution, but in this court, our courts are the great levelers, and in our courts, all men are created equal." Atticus is actually condemning the court system, the justice court system. Okay? The system that he calls the great leveler, he knows truly is not. All right? So for him to say, in our courts, all men are created equal, he knows for a fact that is not true in the southern states. All right? So he is condemning the court system. At the same time, he is pleading to the humanity of the jury. He's pleading them to find the dignity within themselves to make the right choice, because they all know that Tom Robinson is innocent. They know that he did nothing to Mayella. Okay. We'll end there for that chapter. Okay, before we go on, just talking about the trial itself, which I know you all read, and so you all understand it perfectly. But let's talk a little bit about Tom's testimony. So, not necessarily what Scout's realization during his testimony was, but just what we realized in general about what actually happened that day when Mayella claimed that she was raped by Tom Robinson. So, what we realize is that no, Tom Robinson did not rape Mayella Ewell. No, he did not beat her up either. Who did was her father, Bob Ewell. No, he didn't rape her. He beat her up here, though. So, Tom Robinson was on the property that day because he would often come to help Mayella Ewell because he felt sorry for her, which is the worst thing he could have said in his testimony, and that's what the prosecutor focuses in on when Mr. Gilmer says, "You felt sorry for her," on page 197. You felt sorry for her. Mr. Gilmer seemed to rise to the ceiling. This is the worst thing Tom could have said, because for a black man to say that he felt sorry for a white woman is truly the worst thing you could have said. That just, it throws society on its head. Okay, but the fact was Tom did feel sorry for her because she was being abused. She was alone. She was taking care of all these children. And so he would often come to help her out. And over time, Mayella fell in love, we'll say. I don't think it would be true love, but she developed feelings for Tom Robinson. And so what she did was she saved all her nickels for an entire year to be able to send all the kids out to town for ice cream so that she could have the possibility of being alone with Tom Robinson, which when you think of, that is extremely sad, that she was so lonely that her only positive interaction with anyone was Tom Robinson, that she saved money for an entire year just to have a couple hours alone with him. In that way, we can actually empathize with Mayella. That speaks to how tragic her situation truly is. Regardless, she comes on to Tom, and Bob Ewell sees it, and so he chases Tom off. Nothing happens between Tom and Mayella. Also, Tom refused her advances, but Bob Ewell, seeing his daughter come on to Tom Robinson, beats her, and then, of course, doesn't want this rumor to get out to the community. So what's the best way to get rid of Tom? Well, you accuse him of raping Mayella, and then that will explain why she's beaten up, and it'll also get rid of him and his testimony that she came on to him. Okay, that's what happened. So nothing between Tom and Mayella actually happened. We do get hints that Bob Ewell has been sexually abusing his daughter when she says, on page 194, the witness swallowed hard. She reached up and kissed me on the side of the face. She says she never kissed a grown man before, and she might as well kiss a neighbor. She says what her papa do to her don't count. She says, "Kiss me back." I say, "Miss Mayella, let me out of here," and tried to run, but she got her back to the door, and I'd had to push her. I didn't want to harm her. "Mr. Finch," I say, "let me pass." But just when I say it, Mr. Ewell yonder hollered through the window. Okay, so we do get the idea that Mayella Ewell has been being sexually abused as well. Okay. So after we find out everything that's gone on in the trial, it is completely 100% evident that Tom Robinson is innocent. Everybody knows he's innocent. But the verdict is unanimously that he is guilty. And how does Scout know the verdict before it is read? An old lawyer's trick. None of the jurors will look at Tom Robinson because no one will look a man in the face that they are condemning to death, and that is exactly what they are doing. Okay, they know what they're doing is wrong. and their guilt will not allow them to look him in the eyes. So she knows before it's read out that Tom Robinson will be convicted as guilty. Now, chapter 22. This is what's the most important from all these chapters. All these chapters, we're finding out finally what is the case about Tom Robinson. But thematically, what's significant about it is what is happening with Jem. Okay, so this case would probably be the biggest impacting force for Jem. And I'm going to throw that on the notes here. The Tom Robinson is one of the most impactful forces on Jem. Meaning that it changes him. It changes his outlook on life. Okay, so when we're writing our essays, and in your paragraph 2, you're asked to talk about conflicting and impactful forces and how these forces changed said character. This would definitely be a force to talk about on Jem, because Jem truly believes in the goodness of people, and he believes that Tom will be judged as innocent. So then for him to come out of that trial as guilty and condemned to death, this is especially hard on Jem, because he's forced to shed his innocent view of the people of Maycomb, and he's forced to try to comprehend why an innocent man would be made guilty, and the truth is he just can't wrap his mind around it. Okay, so we're going to throw that up here. So what finally forces Jem over the threshold towards innocence? And this is in our chapter 22, when it starts with, "It was Jem's turn to cry. His face was streaked with angry tears as we made our way through the cheerful crowd." Okay, so what finally forces Jem over the threshold towards adulthood? The case. It was especially hard on Jem, as it forces him, because we always write in the present tense, to shed his innocent view of the people of Maycomb. He's forced to try and comprehend why an innocent man would be made guilty. And the truth is, he really can't wrap his head around it. Okay, I'm going to go on a little bit more. So, in this chapter, Miss Maudie is trying to explain to Jem that absolutely this case was unfortunate, but it is a step in the right direction. Okay, there is a sense that progress has been made, and we see that when Miss Maudie is explaining on page 215 that people like Judge Taylor, people like Mr. Heck Tate, they actually did help Atticus in this trial. So on page 215, Miss Maudie says, "We are the safest folk in the world," said Miss Maudie. "We're so rarely called on to be Christians, but when we are, we've got men like Atticus to go for us." Jem grinned ruefully. "Wish the rest of the county thought that." "You'd be surprised how many of us do." "Who?" Jem's voice rose. "Who in this town did one thing to help Tom Robinson? Just who?" "His colored friends, for one thing, and people like us. People like Judge Taylor. People like Mr. Heck Tate. Stop eating and start thinking, Jem. Did it ever strike you that Judge Taylor naming Atticus to defend that boy was no accident? That Judge Taylor might have had his reasons for naming him? This was a thought. Court-appointed defenses were usually given to Max Green, Maycomb's latest addition to the bar, who needed the experience. Max Green should have had the Tom Robinson case. You think about that, Miss Maudie was saying. It was no accident. I was sitting there on the porch last night, waiting. So we do get the sense that there is hope. Atticus sees the trial as hopeful in that it's a step in the right direction. Jem, however, is not able to see things this way yet, at least. Okay, so we'll write these notes. Even after the verdict has been handed down, there is a sense that progress has been made. As Miss Maudie puts it, the town has taken a step, just a baby step, but it's a step. Jem, however, is not able to see things this way. Scout is bewildered by the verdict. She doesn't get it. But like Atticus, she's resilient and she retains her positive view of the world. Jem, however, is crushed. So his illusions about justice and the law have been shattered. And in this way, Jem, like Tom Robinson, like Boo Radley, is a mockingbird. So it's not that prejudice and hatred is taking his life, but it does strip him of his childhood and his youthful idealism. Okay, so while the Ewells and the forces, say, of prejudice do not take his life, they do strip him of his youthful idealism, his initial way of seeing the world, which was that good will win out, the courts are just, evil will be vanquished. He no longer has that way of understanding. What hope and what fears are expressed at the end of the chapter? Well, like we kind of talked about, so we see the hope that there's hope in the town, that people actually were helping Atticus along in this trial, even if Jem didn't see that the whole way. And then what fear is expressed at the end of the chapter, Bob Ewell threatens to get Atticus, and he spits in his face. Okay, so Bob Ewell, our lovely man, threatens to get Atticus, whatever that means, and he spits in his face. Now, there's one more point I want to make about this set of chapters. So, leaving off on chapter 22, it's pretty grim, pretty depressing, pretty bitter. But is this supposed to be a bitter story about how terrible people can be? No. The answer is no, in case you said yes. No, it is a story of hope because of Atticus. Okay? Atticus doesn't believe in good simply because he hasn't seen evil. Atticus has seen evil his whole life. He's lived amongst evil his whole life. But in the midst of that, he chooses to believe in the goodness of humankind. He chooses to believe that Maycomb can change. And that's why we can see this story from a hopeful point of view. So no, it's a story of hope because of Atticus. Atticus doesn't believe in good simply because he has never seen evil. Okay, so what I mean by that is if you've lived a sheltered, privileged, happy life where nothing bad has ever happened to you, which probably is no one, but if that is your case and you've lived just this amazing life, then of course you believe the world is good. Of course you do. All right? You don't get a pat on the head for believing in the goodness of humanity if all you've ever seen was the goodness of humanity. It's the people who've experienced tragedy and the people who've experienced heartbreak and the people who have experienced loss and the people who have experienced evil but still choose to believe that the world can be good and that people can be good. Those are the people who truly have hope. Okay, that's what that means. Atticus doesn't believe in good simply because he hasn't seen evil. He has seen evil. He has lived amongst it his whole life. However, he chooses to believe in the goodness of humankind. Humankind. Okay. We are going to end that there. So, I probably should have started the video off with saying that you don't have to watch this whole video all at once. Read a chapter, listen to my notes, read a chapter, listen to my notes, or if you want, you can listen to it all at once, whatever floats your boat. This new way of learning, these weekly modules, it is totally up to you how you want to use your time, okay? That being said, I do encourage you to watch my weekly videos because these are notes that you will be able to use in your essay. So, you know what, we'll talk about the essay later. I'm not going to overwhelm you with that at this point. But that's it for this week. If you have these notes, you have the chapters read, and you take the little quiz at the end of it, then week 2 will be unlocked for you, okay? I will give an overview of week 2 in the week 2 module that you can see as soon as you are done the quiz. So, hopefully you guys all had a great week. Miss your beautiful faces, and we will see you hopefully soon.